What it takes to truly leave no child behind. It is important to note that poor children frequently underperform academically, not because they are inherently incapable of learning, but because they typically have other needs that make learning and concentrating in school more difficult. For example, compared to more affluent children, impoverished kids are more likely to experience food and housing insecurity, have unmet health needs, be exposed to violence, and suffer from adverse childhood experiences. Throughout the United States, children who live in poverty tend to be concentrated in schools that lack the resources required to address their academic and social needs. Poor children, especially poor Black, Latino, and Native American children, are less likely to be taught by qualified teachers, less likely to attend schools equipped with libraries, laboratories, music programs or school nurses, and less likely to attend schools where advanced placement courses are offered. Bishop and Noguera, 2019. The concentration of poverty in America's schools, combined with the array of social and academic needs that are common among poor children, generally makes the task of addressing their educational needs more difficult. For all these reasons, the challenges facing students in poverty and the schools they attend can be characterized as an accumulation of disadvantages that severely limits their opportunities within and outside of school. But because the accountability systems adopted by states utilize the same criteria, namely performance on standardized tests, to rate schools regardless of their composition, Noguera and Saeed, 2021, schools serving children in poverty are more likely to be subjected to sanctions, even though they rarely receive meaningful and sustained assistance to improve. Although a vast body of research has shown how poverty affects schools and child development, both federal and state education policy in the United States has largely ignored this research. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, 2019, 45% of Black children in America are enrolled in schools where 75% or more of the children qualify for free or reduced-price lunch. When the No Child Left Behind Act was enacted in 2001, with great fanfare and bipartisan support, many skeptics, particularly those of us who had worked for many years in America's urban schools, questioned whether its focus on academic standards and professional accountability would be enough to significantly improve outcomes for children in poverty. Our skepticism was rooted in an understanding that poor children needed much more than the law provided. From our knowledge of the research and our direct experience, we knew that the harsh social conditions in most of America's cities, where poverty is concentrated and pervasive, mean that children need both a challenging, academically enriched education and a variety of social supports. Neither NCLB nor successor federal initiatives such as Race to the Top and the Every Student Succeeds Act have offered these to high-poverty schools. Hill, Jeffries, and Murray, 2017. During the 2017-18 school year, 19% of Black, 21% of Hispanic, and more than 26% of American Indian/Alaska Native public school students did not graduate on time, compared with only 11% of white students. The list of supports required to address the needs of students living in poverty may seem daunting and expensive, but it's important to recognize that failure in education is expensive, too. Of course, the burden of meeting the needs of students in poverty shouldn't be entirely on schools. Ideally, if the political will and commitment to reduce poverty were stronger, state and federal governments would adopt a variety of social policies, such as expanding the availability of affordable housing and childcare, increasing wages for low-wage workers, and reducing healthcare costs, to reduce poverty throughout society. Though the war ended in the mid-1970s, poverty didn't, and though the Community Schools Initiative has been embraced in many areas as a solution, at best, it offers only part of what is needed to achieve greater progress. Nonetheless, most educators understand that we can't afford to wait until the political will for a national commitment to address the educational and social needs of poor children is mustered. In the absence of national leadership, schools can still develop strategies that make it possible to mitigate the effects of poverty and provide enhanced learning opportunities for low-income students. The good news is, there is evidence that when significant supports are in place, schools can play a role in improving learning outcomes and advancing opportunities that promote social mobility. Blankstein and Noguera, 2016. An ambitious program launched in New York City in the late 1990s suggests the answer to that question is yes, if education leaders can sustain support for and momentum on far-reaching interventions. Not surprisingly, these schools served many of New York's most disadvantaged children and were located in the poorest neighborhoods. The goal of the initiative was to accelerate improvement among these schools through a combination of academic enrichment and enhanced social support. In 1999, the 47 schools selected to be part of the Chancellor's District began implementing what was called the New Model of Excellence, Cutler, Glaser, and Vigdor, 1999. Additionally, specialized mentoring programs in health and social services for children and families were provided through the after-school programs. The district provided intensive PD to all teachers at the schools, and each school was assigned at least 4 on-site staff developers focused on English language arts, mathematics, technology, and implementation of the curricular changes. Though math outcomes in the Chancellor's District schools remained below the citywide average, attendance and discipline referral rates improved and students' course grades rose, providing clear evidence that the initiative was beginning to make an impact. Despite those gains, the Chancellor's District initiative was terminated in 2003 when a new chancellor was appointed, and a mayoral-controlled system was established for the purpose of restructuring the system and increasing accountability in the city's schools. It's important to note, however, that not long after the Chancellor's District was sunsetted, another ambitious school-based anti-poverty initiative was launched in New York. HCZ has been widely heralded as the most effective strategy created to address the educational and social needs of poor children. Although we don't subscribe to conspiracy theories, we also don't believe that the failure of schools that serve disproportionate numbers of poor children is accidental or the result of professional incompetence. In a wealthy, technologically advanced nation such as the United States, the only logical reason why failure among schools serving poor children is so common is that we simply haven't been able to generate and sustain the will to meet the needs of poor kids. 21 years after NCLB was enacted, it's clear that the law and kindred policy initiatives to strengthen school accountability have failed to achieve their grand promises. The failure of policymakers to adopt more far-reaching strategies to mitigate the effects of poverty on learning has allowed those with the most power, including governors and state legislatures, to avoid accepting any responsibility for improving the lives of poor kids or to adequately support the schools they attend. As we've stated, poverty impacts child development in a variety of ways, and when children arrive at school with unmet basic and social needs, it always makes the job of educating them more difficult. However, poverty remains an educational issue in the United States because our policymakers have not committed themselves and the vast resources of this nation to fighting it. In many cases, policy strategies ostensibly aimed at alleviating poverty more often perpetuate poverty because the services provided by public agencies and nonprofits to poor children and their families operate in silos. More often than not, the health and social service providers and city and county services are disconnected from the education system where poor children are present for 180 days a year or more. We now know that reducing poverty and improving outcomes for poor children, both academic and developmental, requires more than increased funding. Education leaders, teachers, unions, parents, and governing bodies must be part of the effort to change and improve high-poverty schools and enhance. When schools cannot meet the instructional needs of children, or when classroom teachers and school leaders are insufficiently trained and incentivized, children in poverty continue to languish and remain behind. Small and incremental fixes like a new reading program, more technology, or safer classrooms may all be needed, but they must be part of a coordinated, comprehensive anti-poverty strategy that is pursued throughout the nation. Recent data from the National Assessment of Education Progress shows that the pandemic exacerbated pre-existing disparities in student achievement, and that poor children again experience the greatest losses. Modan, 2022.